Thank you very much. It's very good to be here in Biola again, and good to see some familiar faces. I know some of you have travelled across the Atlantic and been with me in the little church of St Edward, King and Martyr in Cambridge, that I also helped to serve, and it's lovely for me to now fly back and be with you. I'm going to start with a poem. There'll be a combination of poems and songs this evening, so hopefully, at least for those of you that aren't keen on poetry, there'll be a moment of relief when I pick up the guitar. And for those of you who realise just how quite primitive that guitar playing is, there'll be a moment of relief when I come over and do the poems. So, but I want to start with a poem which is about poetry itself, though I hope it's also about prayer, and which talks about listening and music. It's traditional in some forms of classical poetry to begin a poem with or a book of poems with the invocation, the calling of the muse. This book, The Singing Bowl, it's almost the other way around. When I wrote the poem, I began to realize it was not me talking to the muse, but the muse finally shutting me up long enough to get a word in edgeways and tell me what it is that I should be doing as a poet, actually, and as a person. So I hear this poem as a kind of word to me from the muse. It's called Singing Bowl. Begin the song exactly where you are. Remain within the world of which you're made. Call nothing common in the earth or air. Accept it all and let it be for good. Start with the very breath you breathe in now, this moment's pulse, this rhythm in your blood, and listen to it, ringing soft and low. Stay with the music. Words will come in time. Slow down your breathing. Keep it deep and slow. Become an open singing bowl whose chime is richness rising out of emptiness and timelessness resounding into time. And when the heart is full of quietness, begin the song exactly where you are. So I suppose that it's partly about the kind of state one might want to be in both prayer and in making poetry. But as we were hearing earlier, you know, the great miracle, the daily miracle, the astonishing miracle is language itself, is the miraculous and extraordinary and mysterious way in which just the 26 letters of the alphabet can combine and recombine in such a way that myriad worlds and embedded in them beautiful truths can be summoned as your imagination is kindled through the medium of language by the imagination of another writer. I wrote this sonnet, which is called Spell, partly having that sense of the double meaning of spell, because you know, there's nothing more dreadful than having a spelling test, you know, when you're in primary school and, you know, learning how to spell. I was never very good at it. You all have spell checkers now, so you don't have to worry about that, except when autocorrect, you know, completely changes your meaning. But the other sense of the word spell, of course, is magical spell. Enchantment, casting a spell. And there's a reason why those two words are related. So this poem is just called Spell. Summon the summoners, the 26 enchanters, spelling silence into sound. They bind and loose, they find and are not found. Recall the river tongues from Alph to Styx. Summon the summoners, the shaping shapes, the grounds of sound, the generative grammar, signs of the mystery, inscribed arcana, runes from the root tree written in the deeps, leaves from the tail tree lifted swift and free, shining, recombining in their dance the genesis of every utterance, pattering the patterns of the tree. Summon the summoners and let them sing. The summoners will summon everything. So one can celebrate language and think what an extraordinary and beautiful and astonishing gift it is that we've been given in being articulate persons. We could even go so far as the philosopher of language, George Steiner, went in saying that every act of communication, he said, is a wager on the transcendent. There must be a word behind the words, a meaning that informs all meaning. And I'm going to read you some poetry about that later. But I want also, not so that we don't float off into a wonderful, romanticized, idealistic thing, we live in a shadowed, fallen, broken world in which every great gift can be turned awry. And the greater the gift, the darker the shadow that it casts when it's misused. And that's never more true than with language. I wrote this poem which is called What If, in which I just reflected for a moment on perhaps the least quoted saying of Jesus. I'm working at the moment on a new cycle of sonnets called Parable and Paradox about the sayings of Jesus, though this is not a sonnet, I hasten to add. And the least quoted saying, I think, but the one which ought to be inscribed in golden letters above the door of every politician's office and in diamond letters above the door of every advertising agency is, as you will have now guessed, Matthew 12, 36 and 37. You remember, but I say unto you that every idle word that men shall speak, they shall give account thereof in the day of judgment. For by thy words shalt thou be justified, and by thy words shalt thou be condemned. A hard saying. So this poem is called What If. Are you hearing me all right, by the way? I hear this. Yeah? Okay. What if? What if every word we say never ends or fades away, gathers volume, gathers way, drums and dims us with dismay, surges on some dreadful day when we cannot get away, whelms us till we drown? What if not a word is lost? What if every word we cast, cruel, cunning, cold, accursed, every word we cut and paste echoes to us from the past, fares and finds us first and last, haunts and hunts us down? What if every murmuration, every otiose oration, every blogger's obfuscation, every tweeted titivation, every oath and imprecation, insidious insinuation, every verbal aberration, unexamined asseveration, idiotic iteration, every facile explanation drags us to the ground? What if each polite evasion, every word of defamation, insults made by implication, querulous prevarication, compromising convocation, propaganda for the nation, false or flattering persuasion, blackmail and manipulation, simulated desperation, grows to such reverberation that it shakes our own foundation, shakes and brings us down? Better that some words be lost. Better that they should not last, tongues of fire and violence. O word, through whom the world is blessed, word, in whom all words are graced, do not bring us to the test. Give our clement voices rest, and the rest is silence. So it's a kind of, I suppose, another note to self, really, that those of us that are bound up with language and love it need to be careful of the shadows that it casts as well. So I'll give you relief from poetry now. See what we come up with. I used to do these two things separately. I used to have like my pub music singer-songwriter gig over there, you know, with a few beers in the kind of corner. And then I used to have my kind of high-end literary poetry gig over there. And I really didn't think, like the two audiences would want each other. It was only when I started doing stuff with the amazing Steve Bell, who you'll get to know, and he had me up on the stage while he was doing his singer-songwriter stuff and got me to read poetry in between. And then I suddenly realized, actually, no, you can mix these. So I'm going to try and do that. This is a song called Angels Unawares, and I wrote it. We have a very kind of alternative, kind of new agey, kind of ex-hippie, vaguely the Glastonbury Festival kind of day in Cambridge. It's been going on for about 30 years, called Strawberry Fair. And I've always been to it, but I mean, you could be forgiven if you went to it year by year, and you could see all the amazing prayer wheels and the kind of flying Buddha tents and everything, but you'd think that Christianity had never existed in England. There's just like no sign of the churches at all. So I persuaded the Cambridge churches together to have a presence at this fair and just to have a tent and serve refreshments and just be there for folk. And So we got the tent, and I suggested we call it Angels Unawares. Not because the Christians in the tent serving the tea were the angels, I hasten to add, but because I was thinking of the wonderful moment in Hebrews 13, practice hospitality, for by so doing some have entertained angels unawares, itself a reference to Abraham at the Oaks of Mamre. And the folk coming through the doors might well turn out to be angels, which indeed they did to some degree. So, and that was just the Hells Angels, So, but anyway, at the end of the day, it was a great day. At the end of the day, I wrote this song. Some people say that life is just a given thing. But you and I both know by whom it's lent. And it's right here in the dirt where we've all been loved and hurt, that love himself has come to pitch his tent. Sometimes we're in the fields of holy roses, and other times we're rolling in the tares. But breaking bread, sharing wine, did I feel your hand touch mine? Or did we both touch angels unawares? Abraham is down by the Oaks of Mamre, and Joseph dreams beside an empty barn. And there's a woman by the well, she got dreams no man can tell, although a broken man might keep her safe from harm. There's somebody else inside my fiery furnace, and Jacob is gazing up those endless stairs. We are all wounded on this road, but we share each other's load, and we make each other angels unawares. Everybody backs into the future. Everyone is just feeling for it blind. And sometimes we get lost. All the threads of our lives get crossed. But I'm sure glad yours got tangled up with mine. Day is gone and I know I should be going. There's barely light enough to say our prayers. But give me leave the while for to turn and to see you smile, and leave to love like angels unawares. Leave to love like angels unawares. So, I'll do another song. I have a sort of pub band back at home. There's a band called Mystery Train, and it's just like, you know, a couple of guitars and drums and a bass and saxophone, and we kind of crank out rock and roll. But first thing I did when I got to California, the band would have forgiven me. I went down to Fullerton to sort of pay homage to Leo Fender and, you know, see the Fender Museum there. Anyway, so ideally for this song, I should have the band, you know, cranking the stuff out behind me, playing the odd sort of borrowed Chuck Berry riff. But anyway, so this is a song I wrote called Restless Heart, and I have to confess that I stole the kind of best line in the chorus from the Confessions of St. Augustine. So I kind of, you know, I owe him one. It's a good chorus. I always like that story about somebody interviewing Leonard Cohen and about the song Hallelujah. And, you know, this very sort of, oh, this is such a great song, Mr. Cohen. You know, how do you think you account for the amazing success of your song, Hallelujah? He thought what he said. It's got a great chorus. So, so I kind of got the idea for the chorus from St. Augustine. You know that lovely passage. You've made us for yourself, and our hearts are restless till they find their rest in you. But his voice for somebody in a state of disease. I always kind of think of this song as being basic. Do you guys know about Graham Parsons, who died in the 70s, not far from here? So I always think of this as basically kind of Graham Parsons meets St. Augustine in a Tuscaloosa bar. I think that's kind of the zone. So it's called Restless Heart. I got somebody to wake me up, someone else gonna fill up my cup. I got a whole team of people just taking my mind apart. I got a man on the marketplace making my bids, woman round the block looking after my kids, but I ain't got nobody to rock my restless heart. Well, it's a heart that's been through too many changes, and it's my heart, but it feels just like a stranger. It's my heart, but it's torn into pieces, and it's being torn between a man on a cross and a baby in a manger. I got somebody to fetch my pills, qualified doctor looking after my ills, a plan for my life. I knew it wouldn't work from the start. I got a nasty reputation for following trends, plenty of enemies, plenty of friends, but I ain't got nobody to rock my restless heart. Well, it's so hard, been through too many changes, and it's my heart, but it feels just like a stranger's. And it's my heart, but it's worn into pieces, and it's being torn between a man on a cross and a baby in a manger. Yeah, it's great. One half of the audience is relieved when I put the guitar down, and the other half when I pick it up, so that's good. I want to, it was kindly mentioned, this book, Sounding the Seasons, which takes the reader on a journey using the 14-line sonnet form kind of through the great arch and cycle of the church year. Now, the church year, as you may know, begins with Advent, waiting for the coming. It's all about longing for the coming of Christ. And then Advent moves you into Christmas and the Incarnation, and then you gradually move through. Eventually you go through Lent, you get into Holy Week and Easter. You get the central turning point of the whole year, the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. And then you look at the various other mysteries that span out of that, and you finish the church year with the Feast of Christ the King. So that's the kind of the idea. Now, one of the earliest sort of, Reformed kind of Protestant objections to the keeping of the church year was the obvious point that Christmas is true every day of the year. You know, the incarnation has happened and it remains gloriously and wonderfully true that the Word was made flesh for you. It is true every day, not just Good Friday, that Christ was crucified for you, and true every day, not just Easter Day, that you participate in the resurrection. That is true. And keeping it on one day doesn't kind of make it happen a little bit more or anything like that. But one of my great heroes, Lancelot Andrewes, one of the finest theologians and greatest preachers of the late 16th and early 17th century, one of the guys who was the main, headed up the entire team that translated the King James Bible. He did the whole of Genesis to 2 Kings himself. So he's pretty good, and I'm always trying to get English to appreciate him much more. I was really pleased when I came over to England, just when I arrived here, I was going, and there were quite a few people with these big t-shirts that said like, I heart LA. And I thought, great, you like Lancelot Andrewes too. This is fantastic. I got one of those I love LA t-shirts myself now, because of that. But, so Andrewes, quite early on in his ministry, made a really, I think, a brilliant comment that certainly helped me to understand how you could participate in the church year and really enjoy that liturgical movement without it becoming superstitious or idolatrous, but becoming rather a series of kindlings and rekindlings of your imagination. And what he did, it was a sermon he preached in Southwark in the 1590s. Would have been great to be in Southwark in the 1590s. You had Shakespeare doing his thing at the Globe, and like a stone's throw away, you had Lancelot Andrewes doing his thing at Southwark Church. It was like spoiled for choice. So Andrewes said, look, it's a true cliche to say that time is a thief. Time is a thief. Time takes and keeps stealing away from you all the best and most precious things. And then he said to his congregation, he says, wouldn't it be great if there was a way of taking a thief who had taken stuff from your house and make him always come and bring it back again? Like he's got to go to the trouble of taking it and then you just call him right round, he's got to come around the block and bring it back to you. And he says, that's what seasons and remembrances are about. If you fix something in time, then time that takes it away on this day must bring it back again to you. And as the seasons go round and time returns, the things you've forgotten and not paid sufficient attention to are restored to you regularly. You lose the day, but the day returns with interest and memory. And I find that a really helpful way of thinking about what it is to go through the liturgical year. So that's what I did in this book, and I'll just give you a little sampling of parts of it. I'll read you the prologue poem, which talks a little bit about what it is, I think, to sound the seasons, and then I'm going to dip in and out of it. So this poem is just called Sounding the Seasons. Tangled in time, we go by hints and guesses, turning the wheel of each returning year. But in the midst of failures and successes, we sometimes glimpse the love that casts out fear. Sometimes the heart remembers its own reasons and beats a sanctus as we sing our story, tracing the threads of grace, sounding the seasons that lead at last through time to timeless glory. From the first yearning for a Saviour's birth to the full joy of knowing sins forgiven, we start our journey here on God's good earth to catch an echo of the choirs of heaven. I send these out, returning what was lent, turning to praise each moment's monument. The final phrase of that poem, Moment's Monument, you will have perhaps noticed I borrowed from, I've got to keep confessing these borrowings, from Dante Gabriel Rossetti. You may remember his famous sonnet, beginning on the sonnet, which begins with the line, a sonnet is a moment's monument. And I thought that just meant like, you write this poem and it just is like perfectly capturing one moment in your life. It was only when I wrote all these sonnets and started reading them out in church that I realized it takes almost exactly 1 minute to read a sonnet. I mean, it really is a moment. And it's a short enough poem that you can hold the whole of it in your memory and attention. But it's long enough that you can develop a point and make something with it. It's a really fascinating form. So I send these out, turning to praise each moment's monument. Now, I wanted to make it clear as I wrote this that although it works with this beautiful ancient tradition that's particularly strong in the Anglican and Catholic and Orthodox churches of the seasonal year, I wanted to make it really clear that all of this is deeply rooted in the Bible, that all of those great ceremonies of the year are themselves ways of centering on, remembering, entering into, and allowing yourself to be entered into by and pierced by the truths that are in the scripture. So actually the first poem in the sequence is not for a day or a season or anything. It's just called the Lectern. And I wrote it about the lectern in our church in St. Edward's, which I think some of you have seen, where we have an open Bible. And I imagined in this poem what the lectern itself might say, if it could speak to you. But I begin by describing our lectern. The bits where the lectern speaks in the poem are in italics, so I have to try and do some little indication, you know. Right, the lectern. Some rise on eagle's wings. This one is plain. Plain English workmanship in solid oak. Age gracefully, it says. Go with the grain. You walk towards an always open book, open as every life to every light, open to shade and shadow, day and night, the changeless witness of your changing pain. Be still, the lectern says. Stand here and read. Here are your mysteries, your love and fear, and running through them all, the slender thread of God's strange grace, red as these ribbons, red as your own blood, when reading reads you here and pierces joint and marrow. So you stand, the lectern still, beneath your trembling hand. So after the lectern, I have sonnets for the four evangelists, and who all have their own feast days, of course, but I put them all four together at the beginning. You're not supposed to have, it's like you're not supposed to have favorite children, so I suppose, properly speaking, you shouldn't have favorite gospels either. But I kind of like John. John is kind of like the poet's gospel. So I won't read you all four, but I will read you John. Okay. So this is my take on the kind of characteristics of John's gospel. John. This is the gospel of the primal light, the first beginning and the fruitful end, the soaring glory of an eagle's flight, the quiet touch of a beloved friend. This is the gospel of our transformation, water to wine and grain to living bread, blindness to sight and sorrow to elation, and Lazarus himself back from the dead. This is the gospel of all inner meaning, the heart of heaven opened to the earth, a gentle friend on Jesus' bosom leaning, and Nicodemus offered a new birth. No need to search the heavens high above. Come close with John and feel the pulse of love. So I kind of like that gospel. So then comes my take on Advent. I do through a series of 7 poems on the so-called Great O antiphons, which are wonderful, wonderful series of very early prayers, possibly as early as the 6th or 7th century, which call on Christ to come. But in a very interesting way, they don't say, "Oh, Jesus, come." It's as though, even though they were written AD, the person who wrote them, as it were, had the courage imaginatively to be BC, to say, I need to be in touch again with that great darkness in which I want to see a marvelous light, with those deep needs that only Jesus can meet. And he looked back into Isaiah and some of the other earlier prophecies and saw there was a longing for one to come who would be the Oriens, the dayspring, that there was a longing for one to come who would be the radix, the root. There was a longing for someone to come who would be the Rex, the king, the Rex Gentium, one who would come who would be the clavis, the key, And all these became mystical titles of Christ. And it was only in the last of these 7 antiphons, as they were sung in the run-up to Christmas, that he was given the name Emmanuel. And some of you may know the hymn, O Come, Emmanuel. Do you have that one here? And, oh, golly, that's a relief, it's a relief. I sometimes got the impression that all you do is like sing the word Jesus 50 times in 3 different keys. Which is great, there's a great mysticism in that, but, it's really nice to know that O come thou key of David, okay. So I'm going to read you a couple of these, and the first of them is O sapientia, O wisdom, reaching forth, O wisdom. The original prayer goes, O wisdom coming forth from the mouth of the Most High, running from one end of the cosmos to the other, sweetly ordering all things, come and teach us the way of prudence. So my response to this in sonnet form was this, O sapientia. I cannot think unless I have been thought, nor can I speak unless I have been spoken. I cannot teach except as I am taught, or break the bread except as I am broken. O mind behind the mind through which I seek, O light within the light by which I see, O word beneath the words with which I speak, O founding unfound wisdom finding me, O sounding song whose depth is sounding me, O memory of time reminding me, my ground of being always grounding me, my maker's bounding line defining me. Come, hidden wisdom, come with all you bring, come to me now, disguised as everything. So, another one in that sequence is O radix, O root. And I was really struck by that as an image of Christ, and obviously it's one that's picked up by Paul in Romans and in various other places. So I wrote this poem, O radix, which is the first poem I ever had published in North America. Before this book ever came out years ago, it was picked up by the excellent poet, you guys should be very proud of, Lucy Shaw, who was the editor of a magazine called Radix. And I think maybe I only got it's like, I had a good title for that magazine. So, probably about, I should think, 12 years ago or so. Anyway, this was published in Radix magazine. So, O radix. All of us sprung from one deep hidden seed, rose from a root invisible to all. We knew the virtues once of every weed, but severed from the roots of ritual, we surf the surface of a wide-screen world and find no virtue in the virtual. We shrivel on the edges of a wood whose heart we once inhabited in love. Now we have need of you, forgotten root, the stock and stem of every living thing, whom once we worshipped in the sacred grove. For now is winter, now is withering, unless we let you root us deep within, under the ground of being, graft us in. And I think there's a tremendously deep need to be rerouted, to be radically, you know the word radical comes from radix, meaning root. Not just the leaves and the branches, but the deep roots. It's a really important thing. I learned that actually when my mother is Scottish and is full of wonderful saws and sayings and proverbs and can recite you songs and poems, till not only the cows come home, but they've gone back out again. She's great, but she's always got a good line. So I remember once, I'd been doing something wrong, and I said I was sorry, and I said, "I'm sorry, Mum, I'm going to turn over a new leaf." And she looked at me sharply and she said, it's not the leaves, it's the roots that want turning. Okay, right. Anyway, so that kind of maybe some of that entered into that O Radix as well. So we go into Advent, and then we come to the longings for Christmas. We come to Christmas itself, and I'll just read you one from one of the ones I wrote about Christmas. I'd been particularly struck by what I think was some fairly cheap rhetoric on the part of a sort of somebody doing a sort of series of talks from the more aggressive end of what in England we call the new atheism. There's Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens et al. Some of whom were trying to sort of, I think, browbeat and overawe people with the sheer size of the cosmos. And with the idea that we're somehow on some tiny little edge, this little galaxy that nobody's ever heard of, how could anything significant ever happen in our corner of the universe, sort of thing. Which I wouldn't like that attitude if somebody from London or Los Angeles went and told somebody that they weren't important because they lived in a small town somewhere. I don't see that size, in cosmological terms, I didn't talk about other cosmologically, I don't think size matters, But I also began to feel that actually the more edgy we were, the more likely, in a curious way, the Christmas story becomes. So this is a poem called On the Edge. Christmas sets the center on the edge of town, outbuildings of an inn, the fringe of empire, far from privilege and power. On the edge and outer spin of turning worlds, a margin of small stars that edge a galaxy itself light years from some unguessed at cosmic origin. Christmas sets the center at the edge, and from this day, our world is realigned. A tiny seed unfolding in the womb becomes the source from which we all unfold and flower into being. We are healed. The end begins. The tomb becomes a womb, for now in him all things are realigned. I've sometimes found actually that's quite a good thing when you're having a discussion, a charitable, beautifully reasoned and entirely warm argument with somebody about the most important things in the world, in which nobody loses their temper. And when you're having that discussion, it's sometimes really worth accepting and taking at face value the very thing that they think is going to be crushing to you. And actually saying, wait a minute, that's quite interesting, let's work with that. Maybe I can learn something from that. That's, in fact, what the early church did. When the word Christian was originally flung in their teeth as an insult. They said, oh, that's good, we'll have that. It's like, Quaker, I can work with that, These are the people who've turned the world upside down. I can work with that too, So, anyway, having read that, I wrote that quite a long time ago. I'm just going to read you a completely new poem now. But it happens to be almost a kind of partner to that Christmas poem I've just read. This is the most recent poem I've written. I wrote it for somebody who's going to do a record about entirely turning on Colossians 1. And she's taken the great sort of hymn to Christ as the coherent center of all things in Colossians 1, particularly 15 to 17. And she's given it to three poets, myself, Lucy Shaw, and Scott Cairns. And we're all kind of doing our thing. This one is mine. I got the line, he exists before all things, and in him all things hold together. So, but I actually reflected on the whole passage. My poem is called Everything Holds Together. But I'll read you the passage, that's just the two verses of Colossians to remind you that I'm kind of riffing on in this sonnet. So, Colossians 1, 15 to 17, you remember. He is the image of the unseen God, the firstborn of all creation. For in him were created all things in heaven and on earth, everything, visible, and everything invisible. Thrones, ruling forces, sovereignties, powers, all things were created through him and for him. He exists before all things, and in him all things hold together. So here's my sonnet. Everything holds together. Everything. From stars that pierce the dark like living sparks to secret seeds that open every spring. From spanning galaxies to spinning quarks, everything holds together and coheres, unfolding from the center whence it came. And now, that hidden heart of things appears. The firstborn of creation takes a name. And shall I see the one through whom I am? Shall I behold the one for whom I'm made? The light in light, the flame within the flame, icon to Theou, image of my God. He comes, a little child, to bless my sight, that I might come to him for life and light. So that's as near as we get to hot off the press, because it's not actually on the press yet, but I mean, anyway. I go through the seasons of Epiphany. I also touch a little bit on the kind of, I suppose you could call it a secular thing of keeping New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. I don't know if you have the tradition here that we have in England of ringing in the new year, where you get up into the church spire and you ring the bells at midnight. Do you not do that? Oh, it's great. And there's a great Tennyson poem about it, you know, ring out the old, ring in the new. And so you have these great, I love church bells. I mean, I don't think you ring them the same way here. I think you have them sort of up in an electronic tower playing a tune, don't you? Whereas we have these huge, massive bells that go back to the Middle Ages, which are all slightly out of tune anyway. And then we ring them in a kind of mathematical course where it's called change ringing. I love it. I look at those bells. We've got some fantastic bells at St. Edward's, and I look at these massive things hanging there in the belfry, about to make this huge noise, and I think, the original heavy metal music. This is it. It does not get heavier than this. Anyway, so this is my poem that I wrote about the experience of ringing these bells in the Tower of St. Edward's. New Year's Day, church bells. Not the bleak speak of mobile messages, the soft chime of synthesized reminders. Not texts, not pages, data packages, not sat-nav or locators ever find us as surely, soundly, deeply as these bells that sound and find and call us all at once. Ears of my ears can hear. My body feels this call to prayer that is itself a dance. So, ring them out in joy and jubilation. Sound them in sorrow, tolling for the lost. Oh, let them wake the church and rouse the nation, a sleeping lion stirred to life at last. Begin again, they sing again, begin. A ring and rhythm answered from within. So, a little attempt to add to the bells. So this, just to catch us up, we're going to fast forward to about today. On Sunday we had Passion Sunday. I'll read something with Passion. But of course, this Wednesday, as I'm sure you're all trembling with anticipation about already, this Wednesday is the Feast of the Annunciation. Yes. Of course, in the Middle Ages, you'd have been thrilled because all of these holy days were also holidays. That's where we get the word holiday from. I always find it quite funny when, you know, I understand, I don't follow it, but I understand there's some big cultural controversy over here about the use of the word Christmas and how people are saying, oh, it's terrible, it's really offensive, you can't say that. And you've got to say happy holidays instead. And I'm going like, actually holidays means holy days. You didn't get out of it that way. You know? Like, as soon as you say holidays, you're just kind of saying yes to the entire Christendom schema of things, you know. Like, we invented that word. You know, holy is just kind of subversively in there in the word holiday. So anyway, so of course this Wednesday, March 25th, is the Feast of the Annunciation. And a little bit of elementary mathematics will make you realize why it's March the 25th, because the Annunciation is when the angel Gabriel announces and comes to Mary, and where she, on behalf of all of us, says yes. And the incarnation begins, which will bear its fruit on Christmas Day, on the 25th of December. So the 25th of March is the Feast of the Annunciation. So here's my sonnet for the Annunciation. And it's about seeing. It's about what you see and what you don't see, and what you're aware of and what you're not. We see so little, stayed on surfaces. We calculate the outsides of all things. Preoccupied with our own purposes, we miss the shimmer of the angel's wings. They coruscate around us in their joy, a swirl of wheels and eyes and wings unfurled. They guard the good we purpose to destroy, a hidden blaze of glory in God's world. But on this day, a young girl stopped to see with open eyes and heart. She heard the voice, the promise of his glory yet to be, as time stood still for her to make a choice. Gabriel knelt, and not a feather stirred. The Word himself was waiting on her word. And I actually think that's one of the deepest mysteries of the Annunciation. It's about human free will. It's about the extraordinary grace with which Mary was prepared to say yes to God. And I think whatever we think, Protestant or Catholic, there is something in her and in what she does that is a sign for all Christians of what we are. That we open ourselves utterly to God's purposes. That we say to him, be it unto me according to thy word. And that in some way, in our flesh, we bear out and show who Jesus is. And that seems to me to be very much at the heart of what we shall be celebrating on the holy day of next Wednesday. When I presume now that I've said this, obviously everybody's going to give you the whole day off, right? No essays will be due in, no work will be expected of anybody. You know, you just say, hey, I'm contemplating the angels, give me a break. You know? So there we go. We sweep through the year, and of course we are coming now. We're in Passiontide, as we would call it. We had Passion Sunday. Next Sunday will be Palm Sunday. And it's my conviction very strongly that because Jesus Christ is fully human and fully God, because Christianity is not only spiritually true, but historically and factually true in terms of what happened in Jerusalem. There is a constant and living connection between those epoch-making and world-turning events of Holy Week and every one of us now. If I could summarize that, I would say that it's the absolute conviction that what happened out there and back then also happens in here and right now. And that's the very heart of our faith, is to see that what is done for us on Good Friday should also be done in us in some way. And I wrote the sequence of my sonnets for Holy Week, one for each day of Holy Week and then the Stations of the Cross, in that conviction. And so I look at those outward and visible Bible events and I say, I'm not prepared just to distance myself from them and go, well, that was then and this is now. But actually, I have to recognize that everything there is also in here. There's a beautiful line in the Psalms, in fact, it's also, I think, in Isaiah, blessed is the man in whose heart are the highways to Zion. Really interesting phrase, in whose heart are the highways to Zion. But if the highways to Zion are in your heart, then maybe a lot else that goes on and went on in Jesus' day in Jerusalem is in your heart. And that's the conviction of this poem. It's called Palm Sunday. Now, to the gate of my Jerusalem, the seething holy city of my heart, the Savior comes. But will I welcome him? Oh, crowds of easy feelings make a start. They raise their hands, get caught up in the singing, and think the battle won. Too soon, they'll find the challenge. The reversal he is bringing changes their tune. I know what lies behind the surface flourish that so quickly fades. Self-interest and fearful guardedness, the hardness of the heart, its barricades, and at the core, the dreadful emptiness of a perverted temple. Jesus, come, break my resistance and make me your home. So he comes to cleanse the temple. And it's very interesting, actually, the coming of Jesus to the temple in those synoptic gospel narratives where it's a long journey into Jerusalem, things getting darker and more difficult, and then he sweeps into the temple and makes the knot of cords and overturns the tables and opens up the way that takes away the barriers. But actually, if you think, it's actually one of a sequence of comings to the temple, and it's by no means, in fact, the last. The last is the most mysterious of all. I count that there are 4 advents into the temple by Jesus. First, he comes as a tiny baby, brought in the arms of Mary, recognized only by Simeon and Anna. Then he comes as a young boy, seeking wisdom, talking with the doctors of the law, asking and answering questions. Then he comes as a full-grown man with zeal for his Father's house to make it a house of prayer again. But actually, I think the final one, which is not visible, but is from the cross. As he dies, you remember that at the moment that Jesus dies, the veil in the temple is torn in two from top to bottom. The last barrier, each one of those comings was breaking a bit of a barrier down. The last barrier between us and the Holy and of Holies, the heaven itself, is torn in two, and the way of entry into heaven is made utterly clear at that point. So this poem is called The Cleansing of the Temple. Come to your temple here with liberation and overturn these tables of exchange. Restore in me my lost imagination. Begin in me for good the pure change. Come as you came, an infant with your mother, that innocence may claim and cleanse this ground. Come as you came, a boy who sought his father, with questions asked and certain answers found. Come as you came this day, a man in anger, unleash the lash that drives a pathway through. Face down for me the fear, the shame, the danger. Teach me again to whom my love is due. Break down in me the barricades of death and tear the veil in two with your last breath. So that takes me, I suppose, in anticipation to the cross. And I'm just, as we go through this church year, going to read you I'll read you the one of my, I wrote 15 Stations of the Cross, but this is just number 11. It's Jesus is nailed to the cross. It says what I want to say about what happened there. And then, so we're just not left in that darkness, I'll read you the Easter morning one as well, which we'll anticipate. So this is Station 11. See, as they strip the robes from off his back and spread his arms and nail them to the cross, the dark nails pierce him and the sky turns black and love is firmly fastened onto loss. But here, a pure change happens. On this tree, loss becomes gain. Here, wounding heals, and fastening makes free. Earth breathes in heaven, heaven roots in earth. And here we see the length, the breadth, the height, where love and hatred meet and love stays true. Where sin meets grace and darkness turns to light, we see what love can bear and be and do. And here our Savior calls us to his side. His love is free. His arms are open wide. And I'll finish with this poem, Easter Dawn, which takes us, finish this part of the sequence with Easter Dawn, which takes us to, again, it's John's Gospel. That is a wonderful moment of encounter between Mary Magdalene and Jesus, where she takes him for the gardener and doesn't realize who he is until she hears her name. It seems to me to be so. He blesses every love that weeps and grieves. And now he blesses hers who stood and wept and would not be consoled or leave her love's last touching place, but watched as low light crept up from the east. A sound behind her stirs a scatter of bright birdsong through the air. She turns, but cannot focus through her tears or recognize the gardener standing there. She hardly hears his gentle question, why? Why are you weeping? Or sees the play of light that brightens as she chokes out her reply. They took my love away. My day is night. And then she hears her name. She hears love say the word that turns her night and ours to day. You've been hearing a lot of poetry. I better play a song. So, I shall risk a little bit of theological controversy here. I've lost my pick. I wonder what I did with my pick. This is a classic. Now, you see, if I was in my pub in Cambridge, I would have come to the gig straight from church, and I would have been wearing a clerical shirt with like one of those white collars in it. And I would then just take the collar out and use it as a plectrum because they're really good. They're kind of plastic, they were. But I now can't find my plectrum. Never mind, I'll just have to. So I'm going to record some controversy here because do you remember that poem O Radix I read you earlier on? About all of us sprung from one deep hidden seed, rose from a root, the stock and stem of every living thing. I've thought about that a lot, and I wrote this song which is called The Green Man, and do you know what the Green Man, you get these amazing carvings of what they call a foliate head. It's often a kind of wild-looking face with sort of like vines and tendrils and green things growing out from it. And if you go and look these things up on the internet, you'll or the interweb, as my mother calls it, you can read all this stuff about how it's all comes some kind of new age, kind of pagan god of growth or whatever. But it's a curious thing that you only find them in churches. Certainly they may reach back to some deep ancient sense of the goodness and growth of things, but clearly the people who made our medieval churches thought they should be inside rather than outside. And this song arose from, I was walking to Grantchester and walking along the beautiful hedgerow there with a friend of mine, and we were wondering, William Blake, the poet, had this great fantasy that somehow or another Jesus as a 12-year-old kid had been brought by Joseph of Arimathea to England, which is why the great song that we sing, Jerusalem, so kind of our national song, starts with, and did those feet in ancient time walk upon England's mountains green? And was the holy Lamb of God on England's pleasant pastures seen? And did the countenance divine shine forth upon our clouded hills? And was Jerusalem builded here among these dark satanic mills? Anyway, so I'm not banking on the idea that Jesus was a little kid in the pastures of England, but I like the idea. Anyway, so I was talking to my friend about this, and I was saying, supposing he'd walked along this very hedgerow with his disciples. We were thinking about the great I am sayings in John's Gospel, and, you know, I am the vine, you know, I am the door of the sheepfold. And what kind of would he have said if he was walking, you know, in an English context? And I just, without thinking about it, said, I am the green man. And so anyway, this song came out of that, and it's a kind of slightly weird history, because when I play this in pubs or at festivals where there's people who aren't churched and, you know, would think, they're always really intrigued by it, and they come up to me afterwards and they say, hey, that thing, that bit about springing back green, or, you know, the bread and the wine in that song, is that about Jesus? And we have these really long conversations. It's really great. And then if any of my Christian friends happen to be in the pub and I'm singing this song, they go, oh no, you know, Geit has finally gone native, you know, this is awful. He's kind of neo-pagan, and they don't get any of the Christian references in it. I go, duh. Anyway. My face in the foliage, you've seen that face before. Carved in the choir by your fathers in days of yore. I'm the power in the pulse, I'm the song underneath the soil. I'm the unseen king of the ditches, ragged and royal. I'm the green man, don't take my name in vain. I'm the green man, and it's time to break my chain. And if you cut me down, I'll spring back green again. I'm the roots on the stalk, I'm the tender shoots on the vine. I'm the goodness in the bread, I'm the wildness in the wine. There's power in the place where my smallest tendrils are curled, and my softest touch is the strongest thing in the world. I'm the green man, don't take my name in vain. I'm the green man, and it's time to break my chain. And if you cut me down, I'll spring back green again. I'm the grass at your feet, I'm the leaves that shade your head. I'll be your bower of bliss, I'll be your green grass bed. I'm in the finest flower, I'm the power in the wickedest weed. And I plow the furrow with pleasure and plant my seed. 'Cause I am the green man, I make love with the rain. I'm the green man, and I feel like breaking my chain. And if you cut me down, I'll spring back green again. You can cover me in concrete, staple me down with steel. Spread your houses, your car parks over my fields. But I'll still be there, keeping everything alive. And I'll spring back green, but you may not survive. I'm the green man, don't take my name in vain. I'm the green man, and it's time to break my chain. And if you cut me down, I'll spring back green again. If you cut me down, I'll spring back green again. If you cut me down, I'll spring back green again. I wanted to leave time for some questions and answers and just do some stuff with you. So I'll just do one more poem out of the kind of set that I wanted to do, and then we can interact. And, you know, if you've got requests, you know, we can do that. So this poem I'm going to read you was also just occasioned by something that happened. And, you know, I often get a line come to me, and it's often just something that somebody said, and it just works. But this poem also, in its own strange way, is my poetic credo. It's what I think, you know, poetry canon should be about. So the circumstance was, I should be careful telling this story here because they're never going to let me use any of the photocopies, but the basic scenario was that I was off to give a lecture and a talk on poetry, and I wanted to have handouts for everybody, and I hadn't prepared in time, so I figured I could just nip into the office before the lecture and like photocopy the poetry. And I thought there'd be somebody there to help me, because in my young day, a photocopier only had like one thing. You lifted a lid, you put the thing down, and you press one button, you know, as many times as you needed to get it out. And so I came along to this thing. There was nobody to help me, and it looked more like a kind of Hindu god than a photocopier. It was kind of like endless arms and trays and lights and kind of little Zen sayings and everything. And I don't know, what do I do? You know, what do I do? The bell's about to go for the lecture. So I just kind of put a little bit of poetry in one end, you know, and like pressed a random button and hoped and prayed to get a lot of poetry out the other end, you know. And it started off okay, and then suddenly there was a horrible noise, you know, and the whole thing ground to a halt, and this light was going like paper jam in tray A, you know, open door C2, what do I do? You know, like the bell's going, so I just pulled as much of the poetry handouts and all crumbled up that had been done out of the other end of it and scarpered off to give the lecture with these inadequate, crumpled, ink-stained handouts. And so I did my thing, and I was kind of sneaking past the office door on the way back, and what I feared happened. This kind of hand pointed out, this woman came out, she pointed straight at me and she said, "Your poetry is jamming my machine." And I thought, that's a great line. That is really good. In fact, hey, that's iambic pentameter. Your poetry is jamming my machine. Anyway, I thought that in a lightning flash, and then I said, "Oh, I'm terribly sorry." You know, and I came along and I helped her out, and I was very apologetic, and she showed me what I should have done and everything, and she showed me what I should have done. Story of my life. Anyway, So basically, it was fine. Anyway, so I said very sorry, and I kind of set off again. And I just happened to look over my shoulder as I was going, and I saw that she was uncrumpling one of the poems and reading it. So I thought, oh, you know. So I thought I should apologize with a poem. So I wrote this poem, which is a villanelle, for those of you that like form, so it has some repeating lines. You probably know the "Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night" villanelle. Great. It's the same form. So the great thing about a villanelle, you know, because you've got these two repeating lines, you have them two in the first thing, then one comes at the end of the next stanza, the other one comes at the end of the next, they alternate all the way down the poem, then they come back together again at the end. It's really beautiful. And what's great about it is you only need two good lines for a poem. Like, if you've got two good lines, you can just fill it all the way through. You know, you can imagine Dylan Thomas like, "Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage against the dying of the light. I'm done." You know, that's right. So anyway, so this poem is snappily entitled "On Being Told My Poetry Was Found in a Broken Photocopier." So, my poetry is jamming your machine. It broke the photocopier. I'm to blame. With pictures copied from a world unseen. My poem is in the works, I'm on the scene. We free my verse and I confess my shame. My poetry is jamming your machine. Though you berate me with what might have been, you stop to read the poem just the same. And pictures copied from a world unseen subvert the icons on your mental screen and open windows with a whispered name. My poetry is jamming your machine, for chosen words can change the things they mean and set the once familiar world aflame with pictures copied from a world unseen. The mental props give way on which you lean. The world you see will never be the same. My poetry is jamming your machine with pictures copied from a world unseen. Thank you for listening. So if anyone wants to kind of ask me anything or come back to me on anything, or tell me which 3rd century heresy my Green Man song conformed with, I'd look forward to being enlightened. So anyway, no, whatever, just have a little bit of open time and exchange. You know, I know some of you are kind of ready.
Could you tell us about that poem about the Song of the Rood?
Oh, The Dream of the Rood, yeah, which has a kind of link, I suppose, in some ways to my kind of Radix poem as well. There's possibly the earliest Christian poem in English that we have. English, I mean Old English, Anglo-Saxon, is anonymous, but it's called The Dream of the Rood. And it's a very beautiful poem in which the speaker is probably 7th or 8th century. from Northumbria. The speaker has a dream in which at first he sees a magnificent jeweled cross shining in the sky. And then he sees it like a small jewel. And then he sees through the jewels and the gold. He sees wood and blood and sweat. And then he's just trying to figure out what this is all about. And suddenly, and he refers to it not as a cross, but as a tree. The tree speaks. And the tree says, that was year I hew. That was years ago. Ich was hewn. I was hewn down and pulled up from my stem, and strang feanders, strong enemies came. And the tree describes growing in a grove. It describes the awfulness of being cut down from the tree's point of view. It describes being dragged out and being turned into a gallows for a felon, and how it's up there, and then it sees suddenly the young hero, sees one coming to climb on him, and he suddenly, the tree instinctively knows who it is, and realizes that it's going to bear Christ on it. And the whole crucifixion story is told from the point of view of the cross itself. It's absolutely fantastic poem. And we have it in runes on a cross, a carved cross up in Scotland, part of it. We have one manuscript of it, and we have a little silver reliquary with part of it on it as well. It's a really remarkable poem. I take a lot of inspiration from that early Anglo-Saxon period myself, and particularly from the kind of golden age of Northumberland, the age of St. Cuthbert and St. Bede, and the famous Lindisfarne Gospels. I've written sonnets about that as well. Yeah. Anybody want to pick up on anything I've done this evening, or come back to me on anything? Yeah?
It's kind of a small question, but in Word in the Wilderness, you have several saints' days, including Herbert. Why not John Donne?
That's a good one. That's a really good question. Well, George Herbert certainly kind of had to be there. I mean, the short answer to that question is that there is not an official John Donne Day. I mean, in that book, Word in the Wilderness, which has just come out, that's a kind of a poem a day for Lent, not just mine, but lots of other people's, and a little essay on each poem, and it's a kind of devotional. But obviously Lent varies depending on the date of Easter. So I looked at all the possible dates of Easter, for the next 20 or 30 years, and figured out which saints' days would fall on them. And I did the saints' days for that. Now, why does the church remember Herbert in a way that it doesn't remember Donne? Now, that's a very interesting question. Maybe Donne is a little bit too hot to handle. I actually Donne is such an honest, but I mean, to my mind, the Holy Sonnets and Donne's Divine Poetry has a deeper and more profound ring of truth, precisely because I know all the love poetry as well. And when he says to God, I will never be chaste unless you ravish me, I say, I know, I'm with you, brother. But actually, I think, interestingly, when Donne became Dean of St. Paul's and became, the great preacher of his age, he was not afraid to draw on the language of his own love poems in describing the joys of resurrection and Easter. There's a bit where he talks about how the swaddling, the grave's clothes fall away from Jesus, and he stands in risen. He says, they're scattered like all these rags of time. Incredible line. But the audience, or the congregation in St. Paul's, a lot of them would have known his famous poem, The Sun Rising. Busy old fool, unruly sun, where dost thou thus through windows and through curtains call on us? Must to thy motions lovers' seasons run? Love all alike, no season knows nor clime, nor hours, days, months, which are the rags of time. So he was deliberately alluding to that sense of a moment of transcendence in human loving, and saying, well, actually, if you think that's a moment of transcendence, then try the resurrection, I would be quite happy to have a day remembering Donne, but we've got to wait for the church to catch up with these finer insights. Some of you have been reading George Herbert, is that right? Am I right in thinking that some of you? Well, maybe I could be excused for just doing my George Herbert sonnet then. In this second book, The Singing Bowl, I've got a series of sonnets for what you might call the insular saints, for the saints of my islands, one of whom for me is Herbert. Have you guys read his poem, The Flower, yet? How sweet and fresh are thy returns, O Lord, even as the spring, where he talks about how the kind of dark seasons of the heart and the dreadful winter, and you've gone underground. And then he has that great line, who would have thought my withered age could have recovered greenness? I remember once I had spent a happy evening with the poet Seamus Heaney, and we got on to the subject of George Herbert. And he suddenly turned and said those lines. I mean, he was saying, who would have thought my withered age could have recovered greenness? Once more I smell the dew and rain and relish versing. And relish versing, fantastic. So anyway, you may remember in that poem, he says, oh, that I once past changing were, fast in thy paradise. And it's about that sense of, I'm growing here, but dealing with the weather constantly, I want at last to be transplanted. So I allude to that, I just mentioned it. So this is George Herbert. Gentle exemplar, help us in our trials with all that passed between you and your Lord, that intimate exchange of frowns and smiles which chronicled your love match with the Word. Your manuscript, entrusted to a friend, has been entrusted now to every soul. We make a new beginning in your end and find your broken heart has made us whole. Time has transplanted you, and you take root past changing in the paradise of love. Help me to trace your temple, tune your lute, and listen for an echo from above. Open the window, let me hear you sing, and see the Word with you in everything. Which is an allusion to this, thy word is all if we could spell. Hey, I had a great talk about interesting gigs. I was a poet in residence this last September at Duke University, and it so happens by a really weird strangeness of the academic world that like the world headquarters of the George Herbert Society is in Greensboro, North Carolina, and the University of North Carolina in Greensboro. There's a great Chris Hodgson is one of the great experts on George Herbert is there, and he's quietly built up and amassed a fantastic collection of George Herbert first editions. So he asked me to come out because Herbert played the lute, and we know he sang some of his poems, and because I'm a priest poet working sort of in that tradition and alluding to him, he had this idea that he could bring me out and I would do kind of what I'm doing for you tonight, as poems and songs and moving back and forth. So he said, you do this for me and I'm going to do something wonderful for you the next day. So the next day I go into his department and he just walks over to a shelf and puts a first edition, 1633, of The Temple in my hands. Oh, it was amazing. That book was actually published about 200 yards from my church at St. Edward's, but you couldn't find one in Cambridge. But Greensboro, North Carolina, they got it, man. So I thought, I'm always going to put this on my rider for my gigs. I need a first edition placed in my hands. And it was magic. And I didn't realize what a small book it is. It's a really small book. It's like holding the palm of your hand. You could slip it into your pocket. It was really published as something that people didn't. I did really test the 10th commandment, I have to say at that point. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's first edition. I remember that. I have a great love of Herbert. Just while we're on the subject of the Insular Saints, I'll tell you who hasn't got a day yet, but I think ought to have one and probably will in due course. At least now he's got a stone in Westminster Abbey in Poets' Corner, and that's C.S. Lewis. I was there when they revealed the stone, and I gave a lecture at Westminster Abbey for the occasion, but I also wrote this poem for that occasion. So this is on Lewis. By the reference to Beer and Beowulf, by the way, that's what he called his class in elementary Anglo-Saxon. So it's a really attractive name for a course, isn't it? Beer and Beowulf, I'll sign up for that. So, from Beer and Beowulf to the seven heavens, whose music you conduct from sphere to sphere, you are our portal to those hidden havens whence we return to bless our being here. Scribe of the kingdom, keeper of the door which opens unto all we might have lost, ward of a word hoard in the deep heart's core, telling the tale of love from first to last, generous, capacious, open, free, Your wardrobe mind has furnished us with worlds through which to travel, whence we learn to see along the beam and hear at last the heralds sounding their summons through the stars that sing, whose call at sunrise brings us to our King. So that's my C.S. Lewis tribute. Anybody else want to throw in anything? Stunned silence.
Have you got any comments on Charles Williams?
Have I got? That's a very guy. You know how to find out a guy's weak points. I'm working on that. I'm working on a Charles Williams poem at the moment. It's not complete. I've got one on Tolkien. So Williams and Barfield are still coming. I've given lectures on all four of them.
I've heard your podcasts on the Inklings, and I love them, and I love how you characterize them as sort of the avant-garde.
So there's a really extraordinary photo somewhere of Charles Williams and W.B. Yeats standing with the little Homburg hats and the long trench coats. And it's possible they'd just come back from a meeting of the Order of the Golden Dawn. And it's quite interesting, sort of different directions they travelled at that point, but they knew each other. And so I was going to start with that photo for this Charles Williams poems, but I'm sad to say it is not. It's mainly because of the difficulty of rhyming with Williams, you know. It's like, after you've got squillions, you know what it's but he is a remarkable, and I think Williams and Owen Barfield need to be, you know, brought much more to the fore out of those four friends, you know. So no, I haven't. I have got Tolkien. Okay, so this is not a sonnet. This is controversially not a sonnet. So this is actually also based on a photo. And the photo is of Tolkien, this wonderful tree, which sadly is now no longer there. It was in the Botanical Gardens in Oxford, and then it did this sort of tree drop thing, and the stupid branch drop, you know, and the stupid Botanical Garden people thought there might be some remote chance of their being sued, you know, if it dropped a twig on a passing stranger, and they cut it down, which is just like total sacrilege. But anyway, there's a if I'd known earlier, I would have gone and chained myself to it, but you know, and said, you know, the only way you can stop me from reciting poetry is to put that axe away, you know. Anyway, there's a great photo of him leaning back into this tree, smoking his pipe. So I wrote this. It's called Patterns, and it's bracketed called Tree and Leaf. You may know the great book Tree and Leaf, which has Leaf by Nigel and his wonderful essay on fairy stories. Some of the phrases of which I borrow in this. So Patterns, Tree and Leaf. Tolkien is leaning back into an oak, old, gnarled, distinct in bole and burr, as from the burr and bowl of his old pipe, packed with tightly patterned shreds of leaf, the smoke ascends in rings and wreaths of air to catch the autumn light and meet such leaves as circle through its wreaths and patter down in patterns on their own to the rich ground. Again, he contemplates the tree of tales, the roots of language and its rings of growth, the tongue and tail and teller all coeval. And he becomes a pattern making patterns, a tale telling tales and turning leaves, from the print of thumb and finger on his pipe to the print and press and pattern of his books, and all their prints and imprints in our minds out to this grainy patterned photograph of Tolkien leaning back into an oak. So that's riffing on various things he says in that great essay on fairy stories about the Tree of Tales. Yeah.
I really enjoyed your poem, Lament for Lost Words. And that may not be something you have with you, but I'd love to hear just your thoughts on it.
I have got it, so this was, this was just scandalous. I came across this thing, actually I came across it as a sort of meme on Facebook, but then I like all good scholars should, I did not trust a Facebook meme, you know. It's like there's, as they say, you can't always believe what you see on Facebook. Alfred Lord Tennyson. Just because it's got a picture of Tennyson doesn't mean he said it. But so I did track this down, and it was actually an article by one of my Cambridge companions, Robert McSwain, and it was just drawing attention to the fact that the latest edition of the Oxford Junior Dictionary. Now, this is not the full Oxford English Dictionary, but this is the very authoritative and important version of it that they do for children for their first, dictionary growing up through teenage years, the Oxford Junior Dictionary. Because they reckon themselves limited for space, they've been gradually paring away some words in order to add others as language changes and develops. But what I saw in this article was the list of words they'd omitted and the words which were being introduced to replace the words they'd omitted. So they had omitted, in alphabetical order, acorn, adder, ash, beech, bluebell, buttercup, catkin, conker, cowslip, cygnet, dandelion, fern, hazel, heron, nectar, newt, otter, pasture, willow. These are all just listed in this thing. And then it said, this is in order to make room for chat room, celebrity, download, etc. I can't remember the other ones, you can imagine them for yourself. So as I read through this list, I thought, there's just a poem in these names. And I wanted to write a kind of lament. So this is called a lament for lost words on learning. And the awful, do you know what the word is? That the word that the Oxford English Dictionary used to describe what they were doing with these words was culling. They were culling these words. So this is called a lament for lost words on learning certain words had been culled from the Oxford Junior Dictionary. To graceful names and lovely woods, farewell. To acorn, adder, ash, to beech and bluebell, farewell, old friends. I name you in my sonnet, buttercup, catkin, conker, cowslip, cygnet, farewell. Your fields are brick, our books are barren, no dandelion or fern, hazel or heron. We'll go no more alone, no more together. The mountain thyme is gone, and gone the heather. The clinging ivy's gone, and soon to go the kingfisher's blue bolt, the mistletoe, nectar, newt, and otter, pasture, willow. To their last rites my muse comes footing slow. We'll hear no more the heaven-scaling lark. We'll all go down together in the dark. So, yeah, a small protest. Yeah.
Would you be so kind to sing us another song?
Okay, another song. In my capola state, I'll play you another song. I'll just get a capo from the guitar case. Only one here, I lost. So, okay, this is people. The world is full of there are all these kind of more or less explicit love songs, love in inverted commas, about what people have done and what happens out there. And I just think there aren't enough songs about what doesn't happen. And so this is a little kind of hymn to restraint, really. You came to me with trouble in your eyes. I guess you came for comfort and advice, but I could see in your tomorrow places where I've been, and I could see the soul in sorrow shining through your skin. And love is a flame flies from the marrow out to the furthest star. And I'm trying not to notice how beautiful you are. You came to tell a tale I surely knew. You hoped that I might find the words for you, but silence never seemed so rich, no bitterness so sweet, as in the breath of broken speech in words you won't complete. And I have never come so close nor felt myself so far as when I wished I could not see how beautiful you are. At length you spoke your brokenness, you sighed. You reached to me, but I had to turn aside. How can I bear the light that falls in glory on your hair, or glimpse the hints of loveliness you scatter unaware, when just a glance cuts like a lance to the hurt beneath the scar, to touch the tenderness that knows how beautiful you are. Happiness dies by such and such, and I know our eyes should never meet, our lips should never touch. I guess I had best turn my back and pick up my guitar, and only tell this empty room how beautiful you are, how beautiful you are, how beautiful you are. Anybody?
Could you describe it in relationship of technology to your phones? Because some of the phones have cell phones, computer images or something kind of negative, but others, accelerators, was kind of windows into the natural world. So how do you grapple with it?
Yeah, well, thank you. That's a very good question. And what I think you've put your finger on, which is absolutely right, is that there is an ambivalence in my poetry about technology. That I've got a sense of what we might damage or lose. You know, I've got that the surface of a widescreen world and find no virtue in the virtual. I got a little poem which is called Iode, which is an ode to my iPhone. And actually it's really short, so maybe I should read it. So the thing about that is I'm kind of noticing, obviously I've got one, I think it's a beautiful thing, it's a wonderfully realized piece of technology, there's great things that it does. I have a website, folks. I put all my poems up there. I found out the technology through a site called Audioboom where I can read the poems. So anybody who wants to can just click on a button and hear me read them. And, that's very helpful, and it gets it out there, and I hope people buy the book as well. But, nevertheless, it's all out there and it's free. So I use the technology. But I've been particularly conscious when the technology has gone as mobile as it has, that one of the great problems of human being is simply being human in the place you're in, really rooted in the place you are, and being present. To practice presence is the key to everything. That's why I think Holy Communion is so important. I mean, I always love these controversies where when people say to me, hey, I hear you're quite an Anglo-Catholic guy, do you believe in the real presence? And I said, yeah, I really believe in it, and I've been trying for it all my life, but I don't think I've been really present at the communion yet. I'm working on it. I'm trying to get there. Jesus is really and fully present. He shows up every time in all his wholeness. And I'm halfway around the world thinking about when I want to be present. And unfortunately, I think we've invented a device that kind of makes it less likely that we will be present. And yet it does so much else for us. Let me just see if I can find this quickly. It says iode. I should say I actually wrote this on my iPhone, because if you're going to speak to your iPhone, you kind of, so it's kind of addressed to the iPhone. But I turned my iPhone off for the gig, because it gets jealous of the books, so because this will tell you a little bit both plus and minus. Iode, my private portal to a world between, my placeless place of virtual exchange. I see through you, though you remain unseen, and make familiar what you once made strange. You make a stranger means to make me friend, whom I can touch, to like, to show I care. You make a means to every unknown end, and make one little screen and everywhere. I am familiar with 100 faces, all famished for their 15 minutes fame. I am half present in 100 places and never present in the place I am. I pull you from my pocket when you call. I touch and swipe as I am bid to do. You do my bidding too, you do it all. What will you make of me, or I of you? And that's kind of the question I want to leave with. Is I don't think, I'm not a technophobe in the sense that I don't think the fact the thing is a piece of techne makes it bad. But I always want to ask the question about masters and servants, is this serving us or is this dominating us? Is this enabling us to be more human or encouraging us to be less human? And I think the jury is out on that. And I think it's not going to depend on the state of our technology, whether our technology is good or bad. It's going to depend on the state of our hearts. And there's no technology to fix that, only prayer does that. Yeah. Thank you, that's a very good question. How are we doing? We're pretty...
You want to take one more question or figure out how we want to...
Do one more question,
On the art of recitation, you have a very particular way of delivering every single one of your poems, most notably because you wrote them.
Yeah.
But perhaps as the years go on by and your particular presentation of your poems fades, how do you think the art of reciting one of your poems to someone who is unfamiliar with the origin and the backstory and all the inspiration that goes into the words, just reading the words, how do you think that would either reinterpret or cast a new light upon your poetry?
Okay, again, a very good question. First thing, I would never want to feel that any of my own readings of my own poems was in any sense necessarily definitive. And in fact, if it really was definitive, it wouldn't be a very good poem. If the totality of all that it could mean was brought to an end in one recitation, then it wouldn't have really been worth writing. I hope the poems are constantly generative of meaning, and I think other people can and should interpret them. Any reader of my poem or any other poem, I would advise to listen to the sound first, almost before they listen to the sense, to get the rhythm and get the sense of the rhymes and the half rhymes and delight in and revel in the sound. And when you've got the sound right, then you can start nuancing the sense. Now, this question of how you read, it actually, I'll tell you an interesting story. I don't know if you've ever heard the recordings of T.S. Eliot reading his poetry. I don't know if you like me, it's deeply disappointing. I mean, it's really deeply disappointing. I mean, particularly reading the Four Quartets, he lives this absolutely deadpan, flat voice doing this. No inflection, no rise, no fall. And you know, they called him Old Possum, partly because like a possum used to play dead, he was shy, he kind of absolute poker face. He used to say everything. My professor Christopher Ricks once told me a story that he actually got to have dinner with T.S. Eliot, and T.S. Eliot passed him the cheese and said, "This is a rather fine cheddar that you might like." And he didn't know whether that meant, this is a really fine cheddar which you, a connoisseur of cheese like me, might like, or this is a rather fine cheddar, probably wasted on you, but you might like it. And there was just like no clue. Anyway, I had been told that one of the reasons why Eliot did this completely deadpan reading was precisely that he was afraid that if he did a particularly nuanced and interpreted meaning, that future scholars would then say, that is what Eliot meant. And it would foreclose on the possibilities of the poem. So I had that in my mind. And then weirdly, some years ago, I found myself, I'd helped to organize a thing to save the building at Little Gidding, which was falling into ruins there. And so we had this big thing at Clare College a number of years ago to raise money. And Valerie Elliott was a guest of honor. So bizarrely, I found myself sitting right opposite Valerie Elliott with Andrew Motion, the then poet laureate, on my right. So I thought, well, as Elvis said, it's now or never. So I asked her, I said, I've heard it said that he didn't inflect in those readings before because he was worried about it. Or was it just that was the way he always, did he ever talk to you about that? And she said, yes, he did. And he deliberately, he actually practiced lots of times and got, and if there's ever any meaning in the way he read, he changed it immediately. And he just did it as an absolute monotone so that nobody would then fix a meaning on something that he wanted to be generative. And she told me that personally, So I would like you all to erase the recordings you've been making. No. I just hope that my interpretation. I mean, I also believe really strongly that once a poem is published, it doesn't really belong to the poet anymore. Like he's had his pay for it. That's fine. He's going to. That I don't think once my poems are published, I think somebody else other than me has as much right to interpret the poem as I have, and may find things that are really there that were less conscious to me. So I've just been doing this going around the cathedrals of England while this amazing radical feminist choreographer, theologian, does this incredible interpretation of my sonnets on the Stations of the Cross in dance. And I'm just a hapless poet reading them, all this kind of extraordinary improvised jazz saxophone and gyrating bodies is going on, I mean, I was thinking a lot of things when I wrote the sonnets, but I wasn't thinking that. But that's her gig, and I'm happy to let her do that with those. And actually, I think she's done some very beautiful things with it. I now see the wisdom of it after doing it several times. I think, oh, I get it now. So I don't think that there's a definitive version of any poem. I think they live and breathe as breath renews them.
Doesn't it make a difference, though, that when you're reading a poem, perhaps in private, versus reading it before an audience like this, I'd almost think it would bring out the performance aspects of your personality. Is that true?
Yeah, it's certainly true. If we were two or three people sitting around a fire smoking our pipes and having a toilet, we might read it. I wouldn't read it quite so loudly, but it is true. In any performance, there is an exchange of energy between the performers and the audience, and that's really important. And that's actually an important. A poem doesn't exist. This Lament for Lost Words. This doesn't. This is a piece of paper with a certain quantum of ink on it in certain geometric shapes. It's not a poem. I don't think it's even a poem when you read it silently. And it only becomes a poem when it's uttered. Shakespeare, in describing poetry, says that, the poet's eye in a fine frenzy rolling doth glance from heaven to earth, from earth to heaven. And as imagination bodies forth the form of things unknown, the poet's pen turns them to shapes and gives to airy nothingness a local habitation and a name. Now, I think that bodying forth is essential in poetry. Indeed, I think it's the essential principle of all art because it's the principle of the incarnation. All the goodness of God is bodied forth in Christ and made available to us. And I think all artists in the end are trying to do some bodying forth. And I actually think poetry is a very bodily and physical art, you know, and that's why my body is growing. No. If only the expansion of the corpulent person meant an expansion in the breadth of the imagination, you know, I would be there. But Bob Bennett would be even further there. This performance is different, not only from what would be if I were reading it to you one-to-one, but it's different from every other thing I'm going to do this week. It's absolutely unique and completely unrepeatable. You'll be relieved to hear, and you know, and that's because that's what art is. That's what embodied art is. But we live in this digital age where everything is fixed, and you know. And I've noticed, you know, now you can get music for free. Like musicians don't make anything out of selling CDs anymore. There aren't any CDs, and everything is downloaded for nothing. But suddenly, people really want to get to live gigs. Suddenly, this live moment where you had to be there is at a premium, and I'm glad of that. I don't think there can be virtual church, and I don't think there can be a digitized gospel. I think in the end, it's an actual exchange of love and meaning between persons, because that's what we were born out of, an exchange of love and meaning between the persons of the Trinity. And we're always at our most human when we're involved in that personal exchange in the flesh, in the same room together. I think that's essential.
So much of what you've given us tonight is, I'm wondering if there are any poems that you think could be benediction for us, speaking of love and meaning in your room.
Okay, right. Poem of benediction. I'll read you the final poem of this sequence, which is called Epilogue Sanctus. And it actually originally arose from an experience of listening to Mozart's Requiem outdoors with two really close friends. And one of them lived in New York, and she went back. We were at Greenbelt. It was the August bank holiday, and she went back, and then that was the September of 9/11, and you know, you couldn't even get through. And I was sudden feeling that I might never see this person again. I mean, she was okay. She was, you know, it was all right. But that's so. I wrote this poem looking back to this moment of communion between friends, listening to great music together. But I kind of wrote it in the shadow of that, in the sense of, you know, we don't know how long we have with each other, and that gives a kind of added poignancy to the sacrament of the present moment. But I also wrote it in light of the resurrection. So I'll read this as a blessing for all of you now, because we are church here. We gather as his church on God's good earth and listen to the requiem's intense, long, love-laden keening, calling forth echoes of Eden, blessing every sense with brimming blisses, every death with birth, until all passion passes into praise. I bless the hidden threads that drew us here. I bless this day, distinct amidst our days. I bless the light, the music-laden air. I bless the interweaving of our ways, the lifting of the burdens that we bear. I bless the broken body that we share. Sanctus, the heart. Sanctus, the spirit cries. Sanctus, the flesh, in every touch replies. Thank you.
Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Visit biola.edu to find out how Biola could make a difference in your life.